Okay, hello everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Emory Climate Talks, and happy belated New Year. I hope everybody's year has been off to a great start. My name is Eri Saikawa, and I'm an associate professor of environmental sciences at Emory University. This is the first Climate Talks conversation this year, and we're so glad to have you with us today. This webinar series is made possible by our anonymous donor that supports our trip to the UN climate change negotiations, and Emory Climate Talks is in partnership with the Department of Environmental Sciences and the Resilience and Sustainability Collaboratory at Emory University. We have so many great speakers coming up this semester, and so please check out our website. In 2 weeks, on February 17th at the same time, we will have Ms. Jacqueline Patterson, the director of the NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice Program. For the past talks, please do check out our YouTube channel and subscribe. We will post the information in the chat message shortly if you're not sure where you're supposed to be going to subscribe it. As usual, we are recording today's talk, and we will make it available to you in the next couple of days on the YouTube channel. For the recording purposes, we have muted your microphone, but if you have any questions during the talk, please feel free to use the chat function to type up the questions so that we can raise them during the Q&A session. Today, I'm very excited to be co-hosting this webinar with Goizueta Energy and Environmental Group. This is our third time co-hosting together, and I love the initiatives and speaker ideas that you all are bringing in. If you all had if you all had anybody that you wanted to hear from, please do reach out and let's try to make the event possible. As I've mentioned in the summer as well, the only way we can move forward is together, and I really appreciate Ankita John for organizing today's event. We have a special guest today, Ms. Sophia Kianni. And without further ado, I would like to welcome Ankita, the president of the Goizueta Energy and Environmental Group, to introduce our speaker.
Hello. So as Professor Saikawa said, we are so thankful for everybody who has made it here today, especially with the semester just starting around. We know it's been a really intense time, so we really appreciate each and every one of you that have decided to make it. Now, I just want to go ahead and introduce our speaker for today, who has had so many achievements on her resume that it was so hard selecting just a few to introduce her. So we want to introduce Sophia Kianni. Sophia is a 19-year-old Iranian-American climate activist. She is currently the youngest member of the inaugural United Nations Youth Advisory Group on climate change. She's also founded Climate Cardinals, which is an international nonprofit with over 8,000 volunteers in over 40 plus countries, working to translate climate information in over 100 different languages. On top of that, in 2020, she was named Vice Media's Youngest Human of the Year. So before I give it off to Sophia, I just want to say, for any questions, please leave it in the chat box so that we can get to it and during the Q&A session after Sophia is done speaking. And now off to you, Sophia.
Well, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. I'm so excited to be speaking with you all today. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and go through the presentation that I've prepared. So you guys already got a brief introduction to me, but today I'm really going to be going through my journey as a climate activist, what compelled me to become a climate activist, how I got to the position of working with the United Nations, how I founded Climate Cardinals. And so this is just a brief overview of the highlights that I'm going to be going over. So to begin, the reason I really decided to become a climate activist all stems from an experience that I had about 6 years ago when I took a trip to Iran, which is my parents' home country. I was in middle school, and while I was there, I honestly couldn't help but notice that the pollution in Iran was so much worse than any other place I had ever visited. You can see by this news title, pollution in Iran hospitalized over 1,500 people in 24 hours in 2019, and that's very similar to the conditions that I was experiencing. And so I really decided to do research into the environment in Iran, and I learned that temperatures in the Middle East were rising more than twice the global average. And this obviously really concerned me even as a young middle schooler, because I had had science classes about climate change and how detrimental the effects would be for our generation. And so I really decided to talk to my relatives about climate change and talk about how concerned I was. But the worst part for me was that I realized my relatives knew almost nothing about climate change, and that even I, as like a young 12-year-old, knew more and cared more than the adults around me. And so that was kind of the catalyst for what made me decide to act and to join various different climate organizations. So these were the 3 grassroots organizations that I began to work with in high school. And so to begin, I was working with Zero Hour. This is Zero Hour, which is a global youth-led movement primarily comprised of young women of color, because we really believe that those who are on the front lines of a movement should be the ones leading a movement, especially because climate change disproportionately affects people of color and women. And so with This is Zero Hour, I was on their partnerships team, and I still work with them today, but I worked a lot more with them in high school. And so we worked to organize global marches. I worked on their partnerships team to create, I think, a network of over 100 nonprofits across the US working to advance climate action. And then because I was really interested in the global climate strikes, I joined Fridays for Future as a national strategist. So that's the movement that was founded by Greta Thunberg, where you strike every single Friday. And so I most notably worked to help organize the Fridays for Future Black Friday strike, which I believe drew over 1 million people worldwide to participate. And then on the right, the other organization that I worked with was Extinction Rebellion. I was an international spokesperson for them, and I also worked on their DC team. We organized a hunger strike in Nancy Pelosi's office, and honestly, that was the first time that I ever went viral. Our hunger strike was covered by many different media outlets, and it was really inspiring for me because I had an outpouring of support from all over the world, and it made me realize just how powerful youth activism could be. And so I think really the biggest impact that the youth climate movement has had was on September 20th, when we organized the Global Youth March, and we had over 4 million people from across the world participate. And again, all these experiences really gave me the courage to continue with my climate activism and to eventually found my own nonprofit and to start working with the UN. And so that was the what's next piece for me. So I spent a few years working with these grassroots organizations, but I really just kept going back to my experience in Iran, where I realized that my relatives knew almost nothing about climate change. And the reason why was because there's very little climate information available in Farsi, which is their native language. And it's not even just Farsi. The United Nations IPCC report, most of their reports in general are only available in the 6 UN languages, and the 6 UN languages only account for about half of the world's speaking population. And so I really realized there was also a discrepancy between the people who were being worst affected by climate change and the people who were receiving information about climate change, because the 10 countries that are worst affected by climate change, none of them are a majority English speaking. And so with that in mind, after years of experience grassroots organizing, I decided it was time to start my own nonprofit, Climate Cardinals, because I wanted to work to make the climate movement more accessible to people who didn't speak English. And so when we first started out, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how you were supposed to start a nonprofit. I didn't know how to incorporate. And so I spent about a year, I think, starting from the end of my junior year of high school, figuring out how to secure a fiscal sponsorship so that they could give Climate Cardinals 501c3 status, which allows us to accept tax-deductible donations and also to offer students community service hours for doing translations. And so I really got everything all into step. And then we decided to launch, I believe, in May of 2020. And that's where TikTok comes in. So I really do think that something that people gloss over is how important social media and press are to working as a climate activist and really in any different arena. When Climate Cardinals first launched, when our website went live, I worked with my friend to make a TikTok video just to get the word out and to tell young people that if they wanted to, they could volunteer with Climate Cardinals to earn a virtual community service hours. So that TikTok ended up going viral, and it reached over, I think, 100,000 people on the first day. And that resulted in over 1,000 people signing up to work with us. And we also got a Forbes profile that led to thousands of additional volunteers signing up to work with us. And so over the past few years, I've really been cognizant of how influential press and media can be. And so I definitely do urge anyone else who's considering starting a venture and wants to get the word out, reaching out to supporters, to reporters, and also utilizing social media are both very effective ways of mobilizing a large amount of people. And so that kind of takes me to where Climate Cardinals is today. So it's been, I think, almost a year since we launched. And since then, we've grown to over 8,000 volunteers in 41 countries. Our volunteers have an average age of just 16 years old because most of them are doing it to earn community service hours for their schools. And we've also grown to 15 directors, and we have 500 team members who help us with different sectors like social media, of course, research. And to date, we've translated over 6,000 pages of climate information into over 100 languages. And I really started Climate Cardinals, just me and two of my other friends, with no real big expectations, just a very big dream and something that I knew was really important. And yet I was able to, in under a year, achieve these great successes. And I think it does show, if you have a good idea and you're committed to bringing it to people, then that's going to manifest itself into success. And so I definitely urge young people, even if you think that you won't be able to come to launch your idea and be really successful and reach lots of people. I didn't think I would be able to either, but I really think it's just a matter of going for it. And so continuing on my climate activism journey, I believe about 6 months after I founded Climate Cardinals, my work caught the eye of the UN Secretary General, who was assembling his youth advisory group on climate change. So I believe it was June or July, he extended me the opportunity to join his youth advisory group on climate change to represent the United States as the youngest member. And so, of course, I accepted graciously. I was very, very excited by the opportunity. And so I've now spent the past 6-7 months working with him to give him advice on his 2020-2021 climate strategy. And so with the UN, we're primarily working on ways to engage youth and to really have young people's voices included in different decision-making processes. Something that I think is really important, because if you look at the past few years, the momentum in the youth climate movement really can be attributed to young people all around the world who organized to have millions of people march in the streets to put pressure on their public officials. And so I think it's critical for young people to be involved in decision-making spaces, to have a seat at the table when it comes to important discussions. And that's exactly what the UNSG's Youth Advisory Group is providing me, in the form of the opportunity to really be able to regularly engage with him and to give him feedback on his climate strategy. And so I think the hallmark of our success over the past few months was definitely that we organized a global youth consultation 2 months ago. And so we had an application, and we drew over young people from over 20 countries, and they participated in the global youth consultation with us. And so we wrote down all of their inputs. We asked them a series of questions about what they really wanted to be a priority in terms of climate action, what they wanted to tell world leaders. And we synthesized all of that information into a report that we wrote that is now published on the UN website. I can find a link and drop it in the chat later if that's something that you guys would be interested in reading. But on the right, you can see a brief summary of our report. We came out with 6 key points that young people wanted decision makers and world leaders to know. and definitely a priority for us over the next year until the end of our term is going to be continuing to host global youth consultations with different themes so that we're making sure that it is publicly available information what young people from all over the world really expect from public officials. And so I also want to just share with you guys a couple opportunities to get involved because so that is pretty much all the work that I've been doing over the past few years. And I really think that it's critical for young people to understand that it's not just me who's doing this work. Anyone can do this work. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to take the initiative to get involved and to act on your ideas. And so on the left, you can see that is an application to join Climate Cardinals teams. We always have active applications on our website for anyone who wants to work on our teams, or you can join us, of course, as a volunteer to translate climate information. On the bottom right, that's on Fridays for Future's website. So you can, this would be post-COVID, but when we're organizing these global marches and global strikes, you can help to organize by joining up with a local group, or you can just strike with your friends or mobilize your school to take action. And then some more opportunities to get involved in the COVID age. I definitely would urge people to check out Fridays for Future Digital, where they're holding digital strikes, and they're really focused around bringing awareness to climate change over social media, which again, I know I sound like a broken record, but social media is incredibly, incredibly influential and is crucial when it comes to activism. And then the last opportunity I'll leave you guys with is creating a chapter for 0 Hour, which is the other organization that I worked with. There are also lots of active sister chapters all over the US, and they're also doing really great work, especially around climate justice. And then this is a list of things you can do to help support the cause. Definitely let me know if you guys have any questions about me and the work that I've been doing, but this is just a brief bullet point list of things that I urge people to do. Number one, of course, is to vote for climate friendly officials. I honestly think that's the most impactful thing someone can do. And even if people can't vote, then they can help to support elected officials who believe in climate justice by donating to their campaigns, helping to organize with them, et cetera, et cetera. And then especially for students, I think that there's a lot you can do on a school level, like urging your school system to divest from fossil fuels, to implement climate justice curriculum. And then definitely on a consumer level, you can support businesses that have divested from fossil fuels that implement sustainable practices. And then above all, what I always try to do is to educate myself and to educate others to stay up to date on what's happening and how climate change is affecting our world and really what we can do about it. Thank you guys so much for listening to my presentation. I'm sorry, it's just been me speaking, but I would love to hear what you guys have to think. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Guys, just a reminder that any questions, please be sent in the chat box. Okay, we have our first question. So I'll read it out loud. So it goes, how has your experiences in more grassroots movements and with the UN differed? Do you find one avenue, so the grassroots versus institutional work, more effective? And what are the distinct limitations of the two?
So I wouldn't say that one is more effective. I would say that each serve a distinct purpose. I think that working with the grassroots movements from the outside was really influential in being able to put pressure on the elected officials that work within the UN and basically mobilizing large groups of support. Like in the UN, you're not going to find people like organizing a 1 million person climate strike. Like obviously that's not going to happen. But within the UN, you can work to create reports like the one that I wrote with my colleagues. You can work to really devise effective climate policy that can be spread internationally. So I think that they are both effective avenues. It's just a matter of what one person wants to work within.
Okay, that was a great answer, actually. Our next question is, how do you think COVID will impact your future advocacy, awareness, and work?
I think COVID has already had a huge impact on my activism, just in the way of the reason Climate Cardinals really took off is because of COVID, because people were cooped up at home. They didn't know how they could continue to really champion climate action, and they wanted a way to help from home. And so a way that they could help from home was by translating climate information for community service hours. And so I think that COVID really showed me that social media and working online are going to be crucial in terms of continuing to build the momentum around climate change, even when we can't go out into the streets and strike. And I think it'll continue to be very important in the future.
Okay, our next question is, what do you think your activism will look like in 5 to 10 years' time?
That's a great question. I honestly wish I knew. But I think I definitely want to continue to work with the UN, work with Climate Cardinals, continue to expand on these projects that I'm really passionate about, and then also eventually take on like a real person job, probably go to law school and then be involved in environmental litigation. Still figuring out the details, still only 19, but I definitely love the work that I'm doing and I want to continue to do it.
Okay, perfect. Any details on the project with the UN? What are some of your urgent goals right now?
I mean, the main role that I serve at the UN is we are the United Nations Secretary General's Youth Climate Advisors. So we meet with him quarterly and we give him feedback on his climate change strategy. We tell him what we think should be the UN's priorities for the next year when it comes to climate action. I can't divulge too much, but that really is our main role at the UN.
Okay. And our other question is, what has been your biggest obstacle in your journey as an advocate for climate change awareness?
I think in the beginning, it really was my age to a certain extent, just because it's hard being a 16-year-old with big ideas and telling adults, this is what I think we should be doing. This is how we can really achieve broad climate action. Obviously, I think that it's hard to be taken seriously, but then after a few years of working my way up to the UN, it's definitely become a lot easier for me to approach adults with ideas and to be taken seriously.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, do you think your age has been an obstacle to you? So as I imagined it would be. So our next question is actually a question from me. Do you think our buying habits can be improved to actually have less of a dire effect on the environment as of right now?
So to be totally honest, I think that, if you look at the research, I think it's 70% of our world's emissions are caused by 100 companies. So to be totally honest, this is a problem that needs to be tackled through policy and through passing legislation and through putting pressure on elected officials. I always urge people, if you can limit your own consumption, shop sustainably, eat less meat, why not? Your incremental differences overall can be a huge plus. But at the end of the day, we can't just put this onus on consumers to do better. This is going to be a problem for our government to tackle, and we need to be putting pressure on them to hold corporations accountable.
Okay, perfect. So our next question is, do you think it is possible to balance out environmental initiatives and economic interests? Why or why not? And how would we go about doing this?
Yeah, I definitely think it is. If you look at Joe Biden's climate plan, a lot of the money is put towards investing in clean jobs and really funding a just transition. So I think that when you are considering the issue of climate change, you have to realize that the longer we wait to act on climate change, the more expensive it's going to be down the line for us to fix this problem. So I think that in terms of economic interests, it makes sense to act as soon as possible.
Okay. And then we have another question. How do you think the United Nations can improve in its environmental health efforts? Can it do more than it is already doing now?
I think that there are a lot of ways that the UN can improve generally. To be honest, environmental health is not my specific subfield, but I think that in terms of what the UN can be doing that it isn't already doing is just broadening its outreach. Like that's been my biggest recommendation to them. Like I said, like one of the biggest things for me that made me become a climate activist was that the UN only publishes their reports in 6 languages. And I think that that only limits it to about 50% of the world's population. So I think it would just be a small change for them to put more money and effort into translating their reports and also to increase dissemination efforts, just so that people all over the world know what's happening to our environment, especially as it relates to, as you said, environmental health.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Our next question is, what strategies does Climate Cardinals use to get its translated materials into the hands of people who read those languages?
So Climate Cardinals posts our translated material on our website, and we've had over 100,000 people go to our website to access our resources, which I think is pretty awesome. And then we also partner with the different organizations to like disseminate the information through like press releases, through email blasts, through social media. We have a variety of different strategies, but really we just champion open access to these resources. So anyone who wants to learn about climate change can learn about them in different languages on our website.
Okay, perfect. Our next question is, do you think B Corps are the solution to a lot of the climate issues we face today?
Like I said, I think that the number one solution to the climate issues that we face today is just implementing climate change policy and legislation through the government, basically like stuff like the Green New Deal, where you're limiting the amount of emissions that businesses can be putting out.
Okay, perfect. Our next question is, this is a rather big question, so let me just read it out. What kinds of differences in understandings of and priorities about climate change have you noticed, especially among young people from different countries, cultures, genders, etc.? For example, within the UN Youth Advisory Group or your volunteers across the world?
This is definitely a great question. I think I definitely have noticed differences in priorities about climate change based on people's personal experiences. So for me, like obviously I won't shut up about like translating climate information because I witnessed firsthand what a big difference that would make for my relatives in Iran. For other people, like my friend Rohan, he always talks about environmental health because of his like dad grew up in India, and he was saying how the pollution there has had a horrible impact on his health. So he's always talking about that. So depending on where you grew up, what experiences you've had, I think that everyone has different priorities when it comes to different environmental and climate change solutions.
Okay, perfect. Great answer. I mean, it makes a lot of sense that people's backgrounds end up shaping who they are and what they believe in. So our other question is, how can organizations like the UN more effectively include voices from around the world in negotiations, particularly as it relates to reducing the influence of powerful/wealthy countries like the US?
I honestly think a lot of it has to do with just creating space for those voices to be included, because I think that obviously in the world we live in, money is power. If you have money, you're going to be an influential figure, regardless of whether it's climate change or it's another issue. But even if you are including voices like from the US, I think that it's just a matter of actively making it a priority to include voices from all around the world and to put money towards those efforts. For example, I think the UN has this program where you can apply to be one of 400 young people who are like flown out to Italy to participate in a pre-COP negotiation. And so there are opportunities. I think that, to be honest, they're just like obscure and they're hard to find. So I think a lot of it is that the UN has to be better at like promoting opportunities that are available to young people, because so often I'll see, like, for example, when we were holding the Global Youth Consultation, the way that we got the word out about that was through like our own networks, through our own social medias. but obviously that has a very limited reach. Like there's only like 6,000 people that follow me on Instagram, but I'm not reaching like 100,000 additional people who might have been interested in participating in that consultation. So I think a lot of it is about broadening our outreach and thinking of new creative strategies to reach underrepresented groups.
And I mean, that's a really interesting point, because as somebody that tried to get into youth involvement in climate change, I've always wondered why such initiatives tend to be rather hidden almost. Do you have like a say in that, or why that is the case? Because I couldn't figure it out myself.
I honestly have felt that way a lot of the time, especially when I was first beginning in my climate activism journey. There were so many different places that I wanted to be in. I wanted to work with the UN. I wanted to work with different entities. I just honestly had no idea how. And that's one of the things I've been telling the UN. I really want to make the way of applying for opportunities more democratic. So instead of just like going through an internal process and being like, yeah, like so-and-so knows so-and-so and they nominated her for this, it should be like, oh, like on your website, you can apply to become a part of this youth advisory group, or you can apply to have a similar opportunity within the UN.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot. I mean, I feel like a lot of our generation would really value opportunities like that and would make the most of it if offered that kind of opportunity. So our next question is, who is the coolest person you have met during your advocacy journey?
Another great question. I think probably Jane Fonda, just because when I did the Black Friday, Fridays for Future strike on Capitol Hill, she was also there. Like she actually like lent us her platform. Like she had created, she came to DC and she was like striking for a couple months. And so she let us like use the platform that she had built to strike there. And I got to like talk to her one-on-one, and she was so sweet and so inspirational. And then later she invited me and a bunch of other climate activists to like a press conference and strategy meeting. So I think that she really understands the importance of listening to young people and including us in conversations. And she was just an incredible person. I really enjoyed meeting her.
She's the coolest. I'm so jealous. Our next question is, what is an initiative that isn't yours that you strongly believe in or are interested in?
There are so many. I'm trying to think of just one. I think an initiative or like a nonprofit that was founded by one of my friends is One Up Action. I think it's a really cool nonprofit because they're all based around like what can one individual do to make a difference? Because I think that's a question people often ask themselves. They're like, oh, I care about climate change. Maybe you don't have the time to dedicate towards like founding your own nonprofit or directly engaging in grassroots organizing, but you're wondering like what you can do or what your money can do. So One Up Action really focuses on telling people like small little actions they can take throughout their day to make a difference.
Perfect. This is what it looks like our last question, but it's several questions sent by Professor Saikawa herself. So the first part of that is, do you participate in UN climate change negotiations?
So we will be participating in the UN climate change negotiations at the end of the year, but I haven't yet.
Okay. Do you have any suggestions on how the youth can be involved more at the actual negotiation stage over climate change decisions?
So I think this goes back to what I was saying about how the UN has actually started to allocate funding and opportunities toward this. There's like an application live on their webpage right now where you can like apply to be one of like 400 delegates for COP. So I think that it's not just a matter of like thinking how can more youth be involved, but it's like how can more youth know about the opportunity to be involved? Because I think a lot of people don't even know what the UN climate change negotiations are. So again, I think this goes back to the fact that the UN's outreach strategy really needs to be rethought and made a lot more Gen Z, like taking advantage of platforms like TikTok, which are our like primary way of disseminating information.
Completely agree with that. And I guess our last question for today, how do you make sure that the translated materials that you have for Climate Cardinals have the quality that you are aiming to achieve?
Yeah, so as Climate Cardinals has grown, we've also grown in the partners that we have. So for example, we finished up like last month translating a bunch of reports for the UN Environmental Program, and we're also working with like UNICEF and some other partners this quarter that have very sensitive translation materials. And so obviously they want to guarantee that those have great integrity, not just translated by 16-year-olds who might not have the best grammar. And so we've actually partnered with organizations like Respond Crisis Translation and Translators Without Borders, two of like the largest humanitarian translation organizations in the world. And so we've been working with them and outsourcing our sensitive translations to them because they work with professional translators in order to do those translations. But then for more general, like easy, small translations, we work with our volunteers all over the world. And we also urge them to create chapters so that they can translate information that's pertinent to their own communities, or they can work on their own outreach efforts. For example, if it was like someone like me who wanted to create like an Iranian Climate Cardinals group within their school, where they could translate information into Farsi and then send it to people abroad.
Okay, that sounds great. And that was the last of our questions. So I guess that's the end of the Q&A session. Thank you so much. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to leave it in the chat. Otherwise, I think that's it from our part. Thank you so much, Sophia. This was a great conversation. We learned so much about how we can actually get involved in like a fundamental level, despite there seemingly not being a lot of opportunities for us to get involved. You've given us like loads of organizations for us to research and actively participate in. So we really, really thank you for that.
Of course, it was such a pleasure talking to you guys. I hope this was helpful, and I hope that any students who are watching take the initiative, and if you're passionate about climate change, reach out to these organizations and see if there are any ways that you can help.
Professor Saikawa, do you have anything else to say?
No, that was really great. I think that with the generation of TikTok, I hope that's going to really increase the like representation from all over the world. I think sometimes it's very difficult to actually travel, but just with the cell phones, maybe it's going to be easier for other people to access from everywhere. That's even in the rural areas where, with not too much financial, resources available. So I just hope that that's going to be the way we're going. Maybe this COP 26. I'm not sure if we are actually able to meet still. Are we going to be able to have it virtually? That's something that I really wonder. And that's probably something that we have to be thinking about as we try to be more carbon neutral. But it was so great to hear your experience. I think the students were very intrigued about what you were able to get done. And this was so nice to hear what you're doing. We wish you were at Emory rather than going to IU, but sometime in the future, I hope we can actually meet in person. And thank you for doing such great work. And thank you everybody for joining. We hope we can get together again in 2 weeks and talk about climate change and everything else. So have a great rest of the evening. And thank you again, Sophia. Big round of applause.
Thank you again.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming. And we do, in fact, hope to see you in person one day when all of this is over. But we hope you enjoy your time at IU, and we'll definitely keep in contact.
Yeah, and then thank you so much, Ankita, for doing that too. Sorry, I didn't mean to step over.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Great job, Ankita. I'm going to stop the recording.